Property Investing Insights, your authority on all things property investing, finance and wealth creation with Right Property Group.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of Property Investing Insights with the Right Property Group. In the studio with me is Victor Resmi Kumar. How you going? Good to see you guys. Back again.
Yep. Yes.
For another instalment.
You're looking fresh.
Me?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. How's that? I don't know. Fresh.
I know.
It's not very often you get called that.
Must be the expensive shirt.
Must be the expensive shirt. Well, I actually had a different shirt on today. It was a pink shirt. And then I worked out I was going to do something. It had a big stain on it, which I must have spilled my coffee on in the morning. So luckily I had a backup shirt, unlike you, Victor. I don't know. That's sort of.
I've dressed down today. It's late in the hour.
I remember when you used to wear suits and
I probably wear
jackets and
jackets,
stuff.
yes,
Jackets,
suits
yes.
now. Yeah. There's a big story about suits. I bought my first suit when I was going and talking to agents in the inner west, telling them that I can buy properties on an option. That was a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
Back in the year 2000.
Options.
Yeah.
Options. Do you think back of the young Victor Kumar, property investor, with all the wider and more diverse schemes to try and get in the property, buying and selling property options, and
We were successful at it. Yeah.
I know.
Then the margins didn't work anymore.
And then you stopped it. It's simplicity is typically the most easiest
absolutely.
thing. Isn't it?
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. I don't know how you
I don't know
keep it
what
simple
all
with him.
we were trying to do, just anything and everything, right?
Was it the sort of suit that if you walked too fast, it'd sort of create sparks and set things on fire?
Yep. And this was right in the heat of summer, and I had to park my car a fair bit way away because it was the trusty old Corolla back then.
Good.
And so the car didn't look the part.
No, but I'm sure you look sharp in a suit and you got the deals done. And are many people still trying to do this property option type thing?
There are a few floating around, but it's more your developers and people focusing on rezoned land and so forth. But to do what we had done, where we'd gone to a developer and said, well, we'll take the whole block of units off you and an option, and then we on-sold it.
Yeah.
I don't think there are as many people as there were back then.
Yeah, you still see them on social media, people, telling you all these really creative ways to get in the property with no money down and do the deals and all this sort of stuff.
Someone's paying some money.
Someone's getting paid. But anyway, not why we're here to talk about, but I'm curious that those things still exist. The second episode of our special series on Design Your Decade, hopefully been tuning into this. And we had a chat just before Christmas, and we sort of gave some sense to the sort of goal-setting cycle of the Kumar family. And we sort of picked that up in our first episode of goal-setting around Design Your Decade. That was episode 1. So press pause now if you're new to this and go and track it down and tune in and listen to it, because we're going to get sort of into the meat of it. This month on Design Your Decade, we're going to look at the first sort of year from 0 to 1 years. Now, this is for people starting off in property, and it could be your first property investment, or it could be you're actually adding to your portfolio. So it's relevance for both sides, the two different sort of moving parts to it. And I'm sure there's a Design Your Decade for people who are selling it down, but it's probably a different discussion at a point in time. So why Design Your Decade, Reshmi? Why are we doing this? Can you just sort of bring us back into the logic of this special series?
The 10 years is easy for people to look at in a snapshot in their life, right? So it's something relatable, and building a portfolio takes you around that sort of time frame anyway. And then whatever strategies you employ to reduce the debt and the rest of it, you can carry on from there. So, but the good 10 years, it takes that's a big chunk of your life, and people relate with the 10 years in their life. So, when you look at what are you planning on doing, people think about, between 25 to 35, like there's a career happening, and then thereon there's a family happening. People do talk in chunks, and what I've noticed with my own life, good 10 years goes into different sectors of life.
Be surprised how quickly 10 years, it sounds like a long time, but I actually got a phone call on Friday. I was sitting in my office, small hangover from the night before. I was at at a function feeling pretty sort of not inspired to do too much heavy work. I think I just had something greasy for lunch, and I got a phone call from an agent out in St Mary's.
Oh, of all places.
Saying, hey, we sold you a property in North St Mary's back in 2012 or what was it? So it was a little bit longer than a decade ago. But sort of, made me think about sort of design your deck. I had a chat with him. We bought that property for $212,000 in North St Mary's back then. We sold it pretty much 2 years ago, so a decade on. So we sold it in 2023-ish, it would have been 2022. I think we sold it for $735,000, and he was telling me that he was just got he just sold something down the road from there for 900 and something, and he's going, hey, do you still have that property and do you want to sell it?
Did you kick yourself?
I sort of sat there and went, oh, we sold it for 730 or whatever, and he tunes in this podcast, so you're listening in. Thanks for the phone call, but it was a really, to your point, the chunk of it, like it feels so long ago we bought that, but it doesn't feel that long ago that we did. But you put it in the perspective of numbers, from 212 to a decade, we sold for 735, which is probably now you might get 850 for that, maybe sort of close to the 9. A decade can do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to building a property portfolio.
It does. And with most states, you are going through at least one cycle, if not two in the faster moving states. So that also does the heavy lifting. Of course, one of the things when you do sell property, and there's nothing wrong with selling property because we're buying investments for comfort in life. And if comfort in life means that we are offloading some of our investments, so be it. But one of the things that you do need to make a promise to yourself is that once you've sold, you never look back, because it would have gone up in value still.
It would have, and I wasn't emotionally connected with this property, and I went, oh yeah, if I kept another couple of years, I could have made maybe another 150 or 200 grand, which is a lot of money, by the way. Like, 100 grand a year, you'd be mad not to think that was worthwhile. But the money was redeployed and put somewhere else for the purpose of designing the next decade.
So it served its purpose, and you have to look at it this way as well: that you got out at that time, it did its job for you, but you left something in there for the incoming buyer. Yeah, they've made money as well.
They've made money as well, and I don't know who bought it. I don't know if it was an owner, but we did. I think when we bought that property, and if you go and look at Smart Property Investor, you probably go and track it down, North St Mary's. I think by memory, you remember, it was like an old sort of white sort of clad on a corner block, and you could have put a granny flat on it or a duplex or whatever. Maybe that's what someone's going to do with it. I think we spent 17 grand on it, polished the floors and painted it, and did this, that, and the other, and what a great little investment.
I do remember you did an open day for SPI readers back then.
That was in Cambridge Park.
Cambridge Park, that's right.
We did that. We did that reno there, which was another great reno. You should do more of it, because a lot of people talk about it still, but you don't really see a lot of the hands-on tactical sort of development of it. But
I think people and bringing it back to Design a Decade, people want to know the mechanics of it, because everyone knows, yes, it'll go up in value. Everyone will knows that, yes, if I hold it long enough, it'll serve its purpose, provided the selection of the property was right. But to look at the nuts and bolts of it, that's the real aha moments when people, if we talk about your reno, when they went through that and said, okay, you bought it for this is the reno, this is the finished product. And then we come back to it 10 years later and say, okay, well, it's still here. Yes, it's starting to look a little bit tired around the edges, but that's where the value is now.
It's time to sell. And it's hard sometimes to pop yourself out of your own perspective to your relationship with a particular property and get perception on it. That felt like a lot of money back then. And that's what properties were worth in North St Mary's at that point in time. So the relevance was, well, it was a significant purchase with a lot of money. It was at market and all that sort of stuff. But, the old adage of people always, what do they overestimate what they can achieve in a year, but they underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years, right? The same thing applies with property and property investment.
Would be interesting to see the person who bought it, was he 10 years younger than you?
Maybe.
That's another 10 years.
So you see, but the thing is that, again, I think we sold for 730 or 50. I can't remember exactly the number. Like, that feels comparatively a lot more money today, relevance to what people are earning versus what 200 something grand was 14 years ago. Like, and this is the affordability discussion, right?
Yes.
Like it's like to get into. You think about it today, if you're buying in North St Mary's, like nearly $1 million to get into that market. It's crazy.
It is. Yeah. Who would have thought it'll be $1 million in St. Mary's, right?
Yeah.
And that's the rhetoric of 10 years ago. Now, if I forward pace this from today to 10 years in the future, people would look back and say, geez, you bought that really well at $1 million.
Well, I remember we were out there doing auctions with you guys, knocking back properties because it went $2,000 over what we thought. Like you sit there and just go, wow. It's great. And fast forward again another decade from now, talk about design your decade. Who would think that properties in North St Mary's are going for $1.6, $1.7 million in that period of time?
Yeah.
It's not possible. It's just impossible. How's that going to happen, right?
But it does.
But it does.
But it does. Does. It's crazy. But we're here to talk about the first from 0 to 1 year. So I'll give some sort of relevance and some anecdotes around what can happen in a decade. But, you can only design your decade if you get started. So you've got to start somewhere.
Yes.
And the first year is probably pretty important, I would imagine, Resmi.
It's usually the hardest.
Yeah. What I do is you look at your age and then you map out a timeline, basically. And then it's all about you, yourself as a person, and where you are, what is your age. And then in that timeline, at what age, you've got all these goals. And so at what age you want to have achieved those. And so coming back to the goal setting and everything else, this is really important stuff. And there are some decisions you've got to make. Is all the goals that you list down, are they really important, or is it just nice things to have, or what are you willing to sacrifice if you haven't got that sort of money to make those things a possibility? Because sometimes you've got to take a step back in order to move forward. So in your timeline, then when you have your whole life as it is a timeline, then you can start to see how things will unfold for you. And it's always good to have or be friends with people much older than you to get to see the life perspective. What does it all look like from an older person's point of view, and then you can be more prepared in all aspects of your life. So the planning is very, very important. And so that's how I would look at it. And you were saying it's hard. Yes, it is hard because you've got so many decisions to make. But then those decisions are not for that time only. It'll be
fluid.
Yeah, it'll be ongoing.
Well, shifts and changes, and to your point of, it's important to have reference points and references against what you're doing. But it's hard to compare your chapter 1 with someone's chapter 7 or 8, right? But it's nice to know what that might look like. But it comes back to the point, you've got to be very strategic in how you go about building it out. So, years 0 to 1 are pretty critical. This is when most people either get it right. Well, this is when you either get it right or get it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Phil, you did pick up on the most important bit that Resmi said, right? You have to have friends older than you. That's why I call you my friend.
Really? I think if you've got birth certificates out, Victor, I'd be younger than you, maybe. But we're not old. We're sort of we're part way through the journey.
Partway through the journey. Yes. Yeah. So we're just getting started. Now,
started.
If we look at years 0 to 1, right? So and we look at like launching a rocket, we need to have sorted out the trajectory first. We need to make sure that we've got the fuel right. We need to make sure that the structure that's holding up the rocket is robust enough to withstand the vibrations as we start the engine. So when you look at it from that perspective, there are a lot of things that we need to do beforehand before we even consider buying. The issue we have with most people, with the way that finance is available, the way information is available, is that people take the approach of ready, fire, aim, as opposed to ready, aim, fire. Then the other side of the issue also is, which we'll talk about in a minute, is that there are quite a few people that go ready, aim, they forget to fire.
Yeah.
There's no game.
there's no fire bit in there, right? So we need to be looking at it from, okay, if we bring it back to the rocket analogy, we'll be talking about frameworks in terms of finance and your thought process around money, because that's the key. Then we need to be talking about the structure that's holding the rocket. I just made this up, by the way. So,
no, it's a good analogy.
Yeah. The structure that holds the rocket, which then becomes, okay, these are your buffers in place. These are your entities that you're going to hold. These are your people that are advising you. These are your older friends as well. And older friends in this context could be your financial planner, your accountant, older
so it's
in
paid
terms
advisors.
of paid advisors.
Yeah.
So when
Experienced.
so we look at it as a holistic before we even start thinking of, okay, where are we heading, right? Where are we aiming?
Yeah.
And then we start plotting the aim. We start plotting the vectors to say that, okay, this is where we're shooting.
Yeah.
And that's when the journey starts.
It's a good analogy, and what most people see is the rocket flying through the air and say, look how powerful that thing is, and I want to be on that rocket. But, there is a huge pre-game, pre-season, if you want to call it that, when it comes to investing in property. So a lot of people don't want to do the hard work to work out the trajectory. A lot of people don't want to do the hard work to work out what fuel you need to put in, fuel being cash and deposit and all this sort of stuff. Like, you only see the visceral thing of the rocket firing. You don't see all of the mundane, mediocre, relentless, tiresome, frustrating,
the boring bits,
stuff where you fail to fire a rocket. You got to fail of quite a few times. So,
you don't want it to be challenger, right?
No, people don't want to do the hard work. They just don't want to do the hard work. They only see the end thing. So, so we're talking about the first 0 to 1 year. So we're saying that during that period of time, you would buy a property.
You would buy,
okay.
But there is a lot of pre-work behind it.
So the pre-work could be 5 years. It could be a decade.
Yeah. One of my really close to my heart client who we worked with, and Luke, if you're listening, this is you. He started out when he didn't have enough deposits, and he contacted us, and this was 7-8 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And we got him into the right mindset. We got him into, okay, this is what you need to do. And he's now on his 9th property.
Wow.
Yeah. From a person that did not have a sizable deposit, didn't even have enough for one property, we set him on the trajectory, right? So this is just pre-planning and making sure that we are aiming in the right direction, keeping ourselves away from the noise, keeping ourselves real to our journey. And he's gone through his life in terms of he's single, then he got got married, got kids now, got his own home, and is now looking at, okay, where does this now take me as my next phase in this journey?
So
and
this
is all within the 10-year journey.
Yeah. So he's probably 10 years from the nascent idea of potentially buying property to having 9 properties.
Yep.
So is he done? Is he still at it?
I don't think
hungry as ever?
He's hungry as ever. And the reality is I'm trying to slow him down a bit.
Okay.
Young family now. So we need to slow down and be a bit more cautious and come back and work with the properties that we've already got. And that is part of it. So when you're looking at this journey, there's always planning. And the planning happens throughout the whole journey, if we're talking a decade, throughout the whole decade.
Yeah.
What we're planning on changes along the way. Then you've got the shorter bit, which is the acquisition. And then you've got the consolidation. Now, the acquisition and consolidation would interspace each other depending on what's happening in life. And when you have kids.
Or how long you've got to actually play that game.
Age has got a big factor in it as well.
Mm.
The sooner you start, the younger you start, the more forgiving and the more planned a approach you can have, but take into account the momentum and the trajectory that the cycles will give you, as opposed to then having to force the cycles and do more creative stuff with the portfolio if you're too advanced in age.
So it's an important point, and the sooner you start investing in property, the longer you've got in order to tweak, finesse, fine-tune, see growth, all that sort of stuff, right? So we're talking about acquiring design your decade, acquiring that first property in years 0 to 1. However, there could be a period before that, which is preparation for that. How important is speed and urgency through this whole cycle of pre-planning, acquisition, consolidation, and selling down. Do you got to feel as though the wolf's always at your door to motivate you to move faster?
I would say that we were discussing this in the car, right? It comes back to the personality and how you're making decisions and what your comfort level is, because that'll then reflect into your portfolio, right? And if you are a overly anxious person that's always jumping at shadows, maybe the portfolio is a more sedate, planned, slow, methodical portfolio, as opposed to if you're ready to make decisions really quickly, especially if you're running a business, you're making hundreds of decisions a day.
So you're conditioned.
You're conditioned to make decisions. And this is what all this is. It is making decisions, the right decisions. And not every decision will be the right decision. There'll always be something that you look back and say, no, I should have done that instead of this. But that's part and parcel of the journey. It really comes back to the person. It also comes back to the climate at the time that you have started. So what I mean by that is, what's finance doing? What's the economy doing? What's the social media doing? Because that all shapes everything. I mean, when we started, our climate was what? Seminars. Yeah.
No social media.
No social media. Yeah.
No one to compare yourself to every single second of the day because they're telling you about it, which is quite nice when you think about it. It was easier back then.
It was,
You could say that.
It feels like it's easier,
You're bombarded with so much information, then you just don't know what you're going to do, because then people forget the core stuff, the foundational stuff forget what's out there and just look at what I need to achieve, what I should be doing in my life, and have those key people in the preparation phase. That have you got the right accountant on board? Have you got the right property person? Right property person.
No pun intended.
No, all the clues are there.
Yeah. So once the foundation is right, once you and of course, yes, your decision making, that's a big one. How risk averse are you? How much are you willing to go and would you stretch a little bit more if there's an opportunity that may require, let's say your comfort level is at a certain level, and if you just stretched a little bit more, there's a much bigger opportunity to be had. Are you able to, or are you willing to, so are you comfortable with all that? Because with experience, what we have seen, I mean, we've been doing so many building portfolios for so many clients, and what we see common is we were talking about this. So it's easy for people to do certain things, whereas when it comes to decision making, there's a lot of people, it's very hard to decide. The quick decision making is very poor. Yeah,
and this comes back to confidence around your ability to make decisions, and something you can train yourself to do, right? Like I don't know how many decisions I would make in a day, but it'd be a lot. But I'm not scared of making decisions, but I would have, and most people that know me know I have a process to making decisions. I'd sort of, I get many different views of something, and I'll gather that from different people, and I'll get the facts and the numbers, and then I'll say, okay, in the balance, this is the right decision. That's the decision I make. And you very used to doing it. But if you're not used to doing it, that's why I say property is one of the great Australian side hustles, right? Most people in PAYG jobs think that a side hustle is, drop shipping on Amazon or some other scheme you've seen on social media. The best side hustle, if you want to be a business owner, and the safety of it all, is become a property investor.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Don't worry about becoming self-employed. It's hard work, and most small businesses fail. Become a property investor. That's where you can make decisions, but you've got to condition yourself for decision making.
I feel there's a time when I used to say, when we were low on money, these is early days, and I said, let's just go buy a property because we can fix the money issue. Let's go buy a property. Yeah,
absolutely.
But because of experience and discipline, you know how to navigate it and all this. But the point being is that you're not going to know this until you actually start, and starting is the preparation phase. I'll go that way. I was going to say a different way, which for some people might be, it might be immediate, might be a year, it might be 9 years or 8 years to your example.
So I just wanted to add one more point in there. Once people start buying property, a lot of people get stuck in just that buying. There is more to it after that. So most people are buying and then just keep buying. So what happens after you? When do you stop?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
there needs to be a stop point.
It's got to be a
Yeah.
stop at some point,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you've got to start. So
Yeah.
the key here
Yeah.
is spark. And I would say the speed is the key in that first 0 to 1
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And I think back to when we started investing using Right Property Group, like we moved pretty fast. I can't remember 4 properties maybe the first year, or that, and then we moved really rapidly, probably for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
We could have easily gone twice or 3 times as
Yeah.
hard, like in hindsight, and yeah, it's a nice way to look at it. But 0 to 1 years is absolutely critical because normally that first property is what gets people stuck from
It
going to
does.
second,
It
third,
does.
fourth.
Yeah.
So you've got to choose the right property. But what you don't know when you start investing, you soon learn through time and experience. And what you want is that for your first property to be forgiving, in that you don't want it to be too detrimental, but you actually want it to be a critical driver of capital growth. So what you think is important when you start investing in property, in sort of 3-4 years' time, you go back and go, that wasn't really that important. And most people would say, for example, I really wanted to get the best interest rate I possibly could when I was starting investing in property. Like I'd probably say in hindsight, most investors go, interest rate really doesn't matter. It's about access to.
Yeah.
I think you have to do the calculations for holding a property for a year against the extra interest that you would pay, and you can see the difference, and that's a good way of working it out.
Yeah, I think if we bring it back to a framework of let's get finance, right? Because without having the finance in place, this portfolio is not going to scale.
Yeah.
Right? You could potentially buy one through savings, but you're not able to scale, and you're not taking the best advantage of leverage. And yes, I know we say don't take tax into account when investing, but it is a nice to have. So your interest deductions that you would incur by taking leverage is certainly there. So what we really need to be looking at from a finance point of view is, first of all, your relationship with money. How are you with debt? Are you, if you've got $2 million worth of debt, is it going to give you sleepless nights? And if that's the case, you need to change the way you're looking at it. So instead of looking at it as a $2 million debt, you may turn around and say, okay, that's going to cost me $30,000, $40,000 a year to hold a $2 million debt. Can I create, or can I find that $40,000 every year? That's a much easier way of looking at it. It's a much more smaller number as well. And then we go back into the general mix of life and say, how do we create some of this cash flow? How do you pick up these efficiencies? And something simple as seeing what loans you've got that you can turn into interest only. So you're freeing up that principal component. Or if you've got a car loan, if you've got a couple of credit cards, you consolidating all to get into lower payments, and the money that you free up, you're now using to control a growing asset, provided don't keep doing that every 2 years and consolidating the cards and all that sort of stuff, right?
There was a point in our life when we had multiple cards, multiple loans, and that was a huge debt. It took about two years,
3.5 years,
something like that. So
To unravel it and sort of centralize it all.
Yeah. So if you come back to, so you're finding the efficiencies within your current expenditure. So because if you look at what holds most people back and what holds most people to just the one property is they're not fixing the baseline first, right? So let's say, argument's sake, that the property is going to cost you, and I'm making these numbers up. So let's say it was going to cost you $500 a week to hold before tax.
Yeah.
You've changed a loan into interest only, and now that's freed up, let's say, argument's sake, $200 a week. Yeah. And then you had a car loan that was taking away money as well, and you've consolidated that into the equity position of your home, and now that's freed up another, say, $100. So now instead of coming up with $500 every week, you haven't changed lifestyle. You're having to only come up with $200 because you've already created that $300 that we've just had from our normal expenditure.
Yeah.
We haven't changed anything except the structure of things. And now we're also looking at, okay, what subscriptions do we have and all, what other efficiencies can I pick up? Rather than doing what most people tend to do is, okay, let's cut down on going to
Restaurants?
Restaurants,
Yeah.
And we cut it down to 1 day a week, which is good. But why would you want to compromise lifestyle when you've got these efficiencies here? Now, of course, if you're overspending to begin with, there needs to be some rationalization.
Yeah.
But let's look at the simple stuff first to create that holding cost so that you don't end up resenting your portfolio and it's not impacting hugely into the negative, as a negative force in your life in terms of investing. It's an empowering force of buying property. And that extra 200 that we need to pick up now, because let's say we were saving that money in terms of making extra payments into a home loan, or we're putting money away for that rainy day. All of a sudden, you've got everything there. You didn't really have to change lifestyle, you just change structure, and you've got your first holding cost. Then comes the matter of creating deposits, which, if you, depending on your career, your job, will determine what you pay for in terms of leverage, right? So if you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, a good mortgage broker will get you into your no mortgage insurance products where you'll be doing that. That must be a doctor calling me right
It would
now.
be.
Yeah.
Probably is. I know you do a lot of work with doctors.
Apologies for that.
Yeah.
That was actually money calling.
What's the name of I know you do stuff with doctors or you medical professional stuff?
There's a organization called FICO where I had done a talk with.
Yeah.
I'm still getting calls from that.
I bet you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Certainly, there are many groups out there where they are professionals that have this support group. Just be mindful of the advice you're getting in there because a lot of that is very, very generic. Needs to be coming back to yourself personally. So if you're a professional, you can get 90% without paying mortgage insurance. In other words, you have to put less deposit. If you've already got a property, you're using less equity, which means you can perhaps go for 2 over a period of time as opposed to just the 1.
Really unfair for the other people, right? You're already earning a lot of money.
I don't see podcasters getting no LMI, no LMI mortgages.
I think finfluencers should get.
I'm not a finfluencer. Take that back. I think ASIC don't like finfluencers.
They don't like influencers.
No. And this is a really important point, about Design Your Decade. You get to choose which information you consume, and if you're making your decisions on information we've spoken about before, which isn't factual accurate, peddled by potentially a finfluencer who they've obviously got some sort of objective, be very, very careful because that's where it could all go wrong. And this is the point. You don't want to be stalled between 0 and 1 years. Like you want that to be propelling you into the future, whereas many times you probably see it more often than not that's the handbrake on most people. Then that first year is what scuppers or stifles a proper career, a lifetime in property investing.
The first property is very, very crucial. What
That's
you
the
buy,
foundational property.
What are you going to buy? And everybody's first property would be different based on the different variables we have.
Well, you go back to that original example of that smart property investment portfolio, which we started buying through you guys. You were sourcing and acquiring these properties from 2012. I think maybe that property in North St Mary's was property number 2.
It was number 2.
It was either one. Maybe it was 1 or 2. There was one on Mount Druitt. Maybe that was first, but that was really quickly. They were within.
I think the
months or weeks
of
each other. And that there. Let's look at the result of that. What do you want to achieve in property investing? Well, you want equity creation, value creation to create wealth, and back to your other point, to buy while managing your cash flow as much as possible. Pretty cheap to hold. Yeah, didn't really cost a lot of money. Didn't really impact anything else. Didn't compromise anything in terms of lifestyle, and it went from 200 something grand to 750 grand
without costing an arm and a leg to hold
in a decade. Yeah, without that's ideal.
That's ideal.
So it was the right property at the right time.
Correct.
Doesn't always happen. No. Still doesn't happen. No. Even though there's a wealth of information out there for property investors, most property investors are only open between 1 or 2 properties.
Because you're perhaps buying with the wrong outlook, right? So you really haven't looked at it from a full cycle point of view, and how does it click on to your different properties that you're bringing into the portfolio, because that too matters, right? So when you're starting off, you're mapping out the journey, you're saying, okay, I need to go hard right now, and this is just a scenario. I'm going to really need to go hard right now because in year 3, I won't qualify for finance because I'll start a family, or I'll start self-employment, or I may change careers. So you need to accumulate those properties without painting yourself into a corner. So there's year 3 would be something that we'll talk about in the next podcast, where we're talking about balancing it out again, so that we're buffering, so that we can cater for that milestone, whether it's a principal place of residence and all that. So it gets mapped out on year 0. Then you're also looking at the threats, the opportunities and threats within your scenario. What are the opportunities? The opportunities could be that you're a professional worker. You can get high leverage loans without paying mortgage insurance, or it could be that you're earning heaps of overtime right now, which allows you to qualify for the higher loan amount, and therefore better quality, in inverted commas, better quality property that then can scale a lot faster. And then the following year, you might not have that overtime. And you know that beforehand.
Yeah.
So you're planning this ahead, right? So you're bringing all this into that big plan, so that we're looking at it. You're getting into a helicopter, getting into 10,000 feet, looking at, okay, what's there? What am I seeing? Rather than being on the ground and having the first obstacle obscure your vision.
So critical of this is the finance solution, Resmi, at the front end, because not only can you get the wrong property that will stifle or scupper further advancement and growing into other properties. If you get the wrong finance and the wrong structure, that can really slow you down just as much as the wrong property. Do you see these sort of challenges with people sort of bringing portfolios to you very often?
We do. People are getting more knowledgeable these days, but one of the biggest problems we see is the cross-collateralization, and that is still a problem. You can. We've had stories where when people go to discharge their loans and they or sell a property, and they find they've got to pay the bank more money in order to discharge a particular property, and that's a problem. So people don't understand, they think when they're borrowing, that what it actually really means and how will it impact when the time comes to sell the property.
Yeah, good finance structure, good lenders, and that doesn't mean the big 4 only. Good lenders in terms of lenders that match your circumstances will really make your portfolio sing, as opposed to if you're interest rate focused and not finance solution focused. You will be really stunting the growth of your portfolio, because paying, let's say, argument's sake, paying 0.5% less, but getting no flexibility with your finance, as opposed to paying 0.5% more, but having all of the finance open up to you. I'd happily pay the 0.5% extra to get more funding behind me, because I can leverage that and create a portfolio faster. I can scale faster. And I can also look at different levels of purchase prices, different states. So it just opens up the field for you.
So this sort of first aspect of designing a decade, 0 to 1 years, what it sounds like you need to be creating is optionality.
Absolutely.
For the future. And that optionality might be better finance options, optionality to be more nimble in equity creation, more optionality in being able to manage and massage your cash flow effectively, which all sounds great in theory as people who have been in and around property for a little bit of time, but you don't know what you don't know. And when you kick off, you don't have that experience in hindsight. You can pay for the experience. We'll chat about that in a moment. But you just don't know. And when you set out, you often don't think about what the future might look like. And you're going to get to a point maybe 10 years on where you go, oh, the structure wasn't right when I bought that. I wish I had bought it in this structure. And your structure continues to evolve as you sort of navigate that first decade and decades. So you've got to be kind to yourself and have an appreciation that during this first 0 to 1 years, you're not going to get everything right.
No, you won't.
You know, what might be right for today might not necessarily be right for tomorrow.
So sometimes loans actually hold you back in terms of, let's say the first property was where you were buying, like your option is you're able to go out and buy a property where you'll be doing it granny flat or a subdivision or something, and the choice of the lender there will be a big problem if they do not allow construction. So you haven't chosen the right lender in that case.
Yeah. So the lending also has to match the strategy that you're planning to deploy. Now, there's both sides of this coin, right? So we when we're talking about finance, we assume that you've got a property, that you've got equity. But what if you didn't? What if you had savings? And your savings would only allow you to purchase a property of 400. And this is a real case that I advised a client today, where the situation was that the broker said, come back in 6 months' time, you save another 30, 40K, I'll be able to get you a 450 property. But the reality of it is the markets that this particular person can play in that time frame, that market would have already moved by 50K.
Yeah.
And therefore, what he can buy today for 400, he'll be buying tomorrow at 450. So the question you need to ask yourself when you are planning all of this out and mapping all the processes and putting the pieces in place is, and you keep delaying your acquisition, is are you giving yourself permission to pay more? Because ultimately that's what it boils down to, is if you delay this too long and you go ready, aim and not fire, all you're doing is really giving consent to pay more for exactly the same thing.
And this is the discussion you mainly hear in the media now around, the speed at which you can save is outpaced by the speed at which properties grow in value. So
within reason.
Within reason. So this cyclical structure of, therefore you're always priced out of the market. So the point is that ready, aim, fire. As soon as you can, it's ready you can fire, you fire. It might not be ideal. The location, it might be, a secondary consideration in terms of where you'd like to be investing rather where you have to be investing. But
you've got a foot in the market.
You've got a foot in the market, and therefore you can ride whatever happens to that market. And the logic being that you're buying in the right market. And this comes back to the point of 0 to 1 years. You've got to use that time to get your stakeholder base right and align your advice, really. Those people who are part of it, whether it's a buyer's agent or an accountant, you need everyone singing on the same hymn sheet as well, right? It's hard to get this right, and sometimes the professionals you use might conflict and contrast.
It depends on what their outlook is and what their experience is, how long they've been around as well, and what their primary focus is. If it's an accountant that the primary focus, they don't see the business case of an investment. They're not an investor themselves. Their primary focus is likely to be tax minimization. So straight away they'll start talking structures, or straight away they'll start talking buy brand new, it'll have lots of depreciation, without looking into it to say, okay, this is your cornerstone property, the first one, and you need to be able to leverage off that. And so therefore you might not necessarily buy in, say, in your circumstances, Perth, or you might not be buying in Victoria because it's too negative a cash flow for you, right? So they don't take that into account, and they just purely focus on the tax side of it. And therefore the advice is skewed. Nothing wrong with the advice. It's just that they're not looking at the holistic picture, because that's what their focus mainly is, on tax. But if you went with the right type of accountant, where they are investors themselves, they've got some skin in the game, they've got some experience in the market, then certainly they'll guide you far better.
How do you know if your advisors aren't aligning, Resmi? What would be the sort of telltale signs?
Well, you've got to see what the experience has been like. And the first thing is, like, if that's what you're trying to achieve, have they got it? Like, if you're trying to build a portfolio, have they done that themselves? That's my first thing. That's what we first did. How many properties do you have, or have you built a portfolio yourself, or have you guided anyone to build their portfolio, and how successful has that been? Also, if they would have guided somebody and it was successful, they would have done it themselves too. So that's the one thing. And also, if they did build a portfolio, like, did someone else build it for them, and they were just decision makers and they were not really involved, or somebody just set it up for them? Do they have that real experience with property itself? So my first thing is to look at what they have done, what they have achieved, because if they're going to be guiding me, I'd want to get my guidance from someone who knows.
And do you ever get to the point where your accountant might be going, oh, that person doesn't know what they're talking about, just that their advice is wrong, or a financial planner pretty much going, why are you doing this? You should be buying ETFs or something
Yeah,
or other, right?
yeah.
Yeah, we do get that.
Yeah, we
Does
do
it
get
happen?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
And I am a big proponent of diversification, right? But property needs to be the foundation first, and you diversify from there, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm biased because
Of course you're going to say that.
Talking about buyers, so if you're talking about advisors, so let's say someone's always done house and land packages, and that's all they've done, and of course their bias will be towards that. My bias is towards established properties, but a whole range of established properties, right from simple set and forget to big development sites. Done them all, and I also find those properties for my clients. It depends on the strategy that we put and the capability of the client and what they're trying to achieve, right? So we need to always question the bias of the advisor, because their bias comes from what they have achieved themselves and how and the manner in which they've achieved their experience. And once you've got that, you can then really look at the advice and take it the right way, as opposed to be blindly following it. And when you do get the discrepancies between, say, the financial planner and the mortgage broker, the accountant, and the property strategist starting to talk slightly misaligned or different languages, you can all bring it back to say, okay, now I resonate with all of the advice, but this is my decision, because ultimately you are in control of your financial destiny. And that's where the very first thing we said was learn to make decisions.
Yeah, and you've got to be comfortable with decision making.
Mhm.
You need to
Yep.
understand how you make decisions, and what that may mean is that the advisors you start with today might not necessarily be the advisors you
Yeah,
have in a
that
couple
you
of years'
do
time.
outgrow them.
You do, you
Yeah.
do outgrow. People do outgrow advisors. I see a lot of people outgrowing their accountant.
Mhm.
It's that typical
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, that's usually one of the first advisor that you outgrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's purely because if you go down a pathway of a property first investment strategy, many accounts is a natural home and they're very capable and confident in that regards, or you would outgrow your financial advisor because they might not necessarily have a bent towards property. So you see that happen quite a lot, and the balance of power in the advice relationship. If you think as a property investor, you'd have a mortgage broker, a buyer's agent, a financial planner, an accountant. You would rather probably not call yourself buyer's agents. Buyer's agents, part of what you do. You guys are property strategists,
Strategy.
right?
Yeah.
Which is very different.
Very different.
Very, very different thing. So if you're going to outgrow your advisor, it's probably likely not going to be your buyer's agent first. I would imagine.
Unlikely. But that can happen too.
It does
right?
happen.
So,
And sometimes you just don't get on.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, we don't have you as a client.
No.
Yeah.
I couldn't think
Don't
of anything
get wrong,
worse.
you don't buy the expensive wines anymore.
Well, I think we're overdue a nice expensive
Yeah,
wine.
we
but,
are.
But cash flow's tight.
You just sold a property, I heard.
Buy a property.
No, some time ago. But the idea of cash flow, back to cash flow, is that you want to try and create a sort of an independence within each property of cash flow. So, you always spoken at length, and I sometimes borrow your idea as a make it my own, but this idea of pigeon pairing properties, right? Which is, well, you might isolate, the management of a business unit as in two properties. One might be high capital growth, low cash flow, or negatively geared, and one might be, the other way around. And together you can actually centralize it and have a sense of independence around it. That's not a bad strategy, right?
It's not. And
maintaining your cash flow throughout the journey is something you really need to be on top of.
Yeah.
And how you maintain that cash flow determines how you can continue to buy properties.
And you need to be right across it, because I know in your portfolio you do most of the heavy lifting and the work on it. So you're the cash flow manager. And you think about back to the point around why you're better off probably sticking with a PAYG job and having a side hustle in property. A lot of very good businesses that are successful go bust, not because it's a bad product or they can't make the sales, because of cash flow. Yeah. They can't balance balance of payments between.
There's a telco that's gone bust in a regional area. Just read in the piece today.
Cash flow. Tough, right? And it's a merry game, and property. Sometimes it's easy to telegraph cash flow requirements around it. We're talking about 0 to 1 years of property investing, but sometimes stuff pops up.
Yeah,
that you just don't know.
Yeah. Now, when you say 0 to 1, we the image it portrays is you're just starting out, right? But it's a 0 to 1 reset. So let's say you haven't bought properties. it's year zero.
Yeah.
But let's say you've got a couple of properties, now you need to reset. That becomes year zero again because you're planning again. It's exactly the same thing. Cash flow,
Yeah.
looking at fuel, you're looking at all of those. So you whole round of refinances to extract, harvest the equity out, getting more advice in terms of, okay, I've bought, arguments like 3 properties. Do I now start buying in a entity, or do I now look at buying in someone else's name? The kids have grown up. Do I give them a leg into the portfolio? So all of those things come in as
if you're
a
not
reset.
comfortable with decision making, you probably don't want to be a property investor because
No.
there's a lot of decisions to
Yep.
make as it cascades out. And yes, you've got to get it right the first year, but subsequent to that is a perpetual reset. So what
Yep.
you end up with is multiple properties at different levels of their decades, right?
It's a rolling decade.
Which is a rolling decade.
However, there's an end to it, I would say. Like, we can't keep going every 10 years and continue buying.
Yeah.
It has to match up with the goal that you decided. And the goal in the beginning, whatever you may have decided, that you needed a certain amount of money coming in every year as your income could be different. Now, let's say you've been investing for 5 or 7 years and lifestyle's changing, things are different. You may want to relook at that and say, is this, let's say for argument's sake, you've chosen 100,000 in a annual income from property, and 5-7 years of you've been investing, and you think, am I really okay with the 100,000, or do I want it to be 150,000? So if things changing like that, that's where your adjustments come, and that's where your the year that we're talking about, the reset, all of that. So you, once you do a couple of properties, you kind of get into the rhythm. You know what you've got to do next. So then you come back to that planning again and reanalyzing, and let's look at what we can do. So it's a template in terms of you can repeat it as long as you're getting to your, close to your goal, and you can't keep going on and on and on, for every decade.
Yeah. And this is where we really need to flag that nothing magical happens in the end. You need to retire the mortgages to get to the cash flow.
Yeah.
There is some sell down, planned sell downs. There is estate planning involved in the end. So as we go through this mini series, we'll be talking about all of those things.
Yeah, and they're very important aspects of it. And often everyone gets absorbed with what they're buying rather than the full-bodied view, which is all those different mechanical parts. But what I would say, every single property investor is different. However, the common thread for all property investments is this time quotient, right? Like time affects all property investors. So age and circumstances are directly going to correlate into your strategy and how and why you do stuff. But time is a finite resource. So the more time you have as a property investor, largely you're going to have a more forgiving environment. It means you don't have to move as quickly as what you need to. You're going to have time to manufacture wealth. And we talk about what you can do in a decade. Imagine if you've got, say you start working at 20 and retire at 60 something, right? Like that's 4 decades of property to do the heavy lifting.
Yes.
And if you think about the compounding nature of property, 40 years is a long time.
It's a long time. I think I heard in a podcast someone did some sums, right? So if you bought $1 million property, and if you averaged out the growth in Australia for the last 30 years, it is something around 6.2 or 6.4, which meant that $1 million property went to I think it was 12 mil in the time frame because of compounding.
In 30 years.
Over 30 years, so it compounds. But the more important bit, which sort of got me, was you are actually making $1,000 a day in rental income at that time, because the rents of what's renting out today at 40,000 is likely to be 300,000 at that time.
$1,000 a day.
$1,000.
That's what rents will be at that point in time.
Yeah.
But you just sit there and just, how's that possible?
Well, mind you, when we came in the country, right?
Yeah.
Rent was $150, $180 a week.
Yeah.
Right? Now the average is $700.
So the property, like our first ever investment property, well, forget the first property, the house, our house that we lived in, we then, when we moved out, that went out for rent.
That was $240 a week.
Yeah. And then now it is?
It is now, we just upped the rent a bit. They're nasty landlords, $700 a week. Yeah.
So from 2 to 7.
Yeah, 3 bit
but
times.
then our mindset isn't at the moment of back then.
Yeah.
So now it's still, the 700 doesn't feel like
Big money.
a lot of money compared to the you know, how it just pretty much feels like the 200 of back then.
But you think
It's just the numbers.
Yeah, 200 go, wow, that's nothing.
The numbers
Yep.
appear bigger, but that's inflation for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all relevant. So, is there any, like, thinking of age and circumstances? Is there any hard and fast rules of what to do at different? Let's put your property investment journey. Say how many people start in their 20s? I don't know. Probably a lot more now than what there used to be. Most, but let's just assume most people start in their 30s, right? 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, right? So there's 4 decades. 60s, you're probably still going to have some properties in your 60s to 70s to 80s. So you could have realistically 5 decades of being a property investor.
Yeah.
If you start in your 30s. And when you think about it, you go, wow, that's crazy. Like you sit there going, what are you going to do with all that money at the end of it? But is there any hard and fast rules of what to do at those periods of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I can just make it a really blanket rule, right? In the early stages, you want the market to move the needle. In the later stages of your life, you need to be moving the needle first in terms of growth, right? Because you haven't got enough time for it to be forgiving.
Talking about starting in the late age.
Yep.
Yeah. So how late is it how late is too late?
Look, it's never too late, but it comes back to lending.
Yeah.
Yeah, but would a 70-year-old go and start investing?
Well,
and would it make sense?
Yeah.
I don't
Look,
know.
I've got a friend that he comes and occasionally kicks the ball around with us at the soccer field. Right, he's a young 70-year-old, and he was leaning on to me saying, "Look, get me started." And I said, "Why? You know, you've got your super, you've got your property, it's paid out. Let's look at the negatives of it first before you look at the positives. I can make it work, but if it goes wrong, you ain't got enough years in you to fix it."
Would there's probably a realisation for people who don't really subscribe into the property investment sort of sector or tune in the podcast. Is there an inflection moment, people in their 50s where they go, now's the time, I've got to start? Do more people start in their 50s?
They do, because they are your peak earning years as well.
Yeah.
And then you're also getting your aha moment of, okay, now this is only 15 years, 17 years to retirement, right? What am I going to do then?
Yeah.
I'm taking a long, hard look at my super. That might not be enough. My home is not paid off. And so, that's when they start the investing journey. So really, their portfolio and the types of properties they buy and where they buy is very different to, say, a 30-year-old who could be buying in a slower moving market, who could be buying a more sedate approach strategy property, as opposed to the 50-year-old where we literally got 15 years to get it right.
So in those times, you probably find higher capital growth, lower cash flow versus your 30-year-olds will probably be potentially lower capital growth, higher cash flow because they probably ain't got the dough to cover it. Yeah. Generalizing,
yeah. So one of the things we'll be talking in the mini-series is the 3 methodologies of investing.
Yes.
Right. So we've over the years, we've developed the 3 approaches to investing, which then helps you fit in with where you are in life, what age bracket, where the economy is, where your financials are, so that you can then use the right type of strategy that keeps you relatively safe. There's no such thing as foolproof in property. In fact, there's no such thing as foolproof in investing. But the methodologies we will talk about will be pretty much as clear as it can get in terms of not getting sucked up in that maze of noise at the moment, and keeping it really simple, and making sure that we are addressing all of the fundamentals of investing that shape the journey, so that we're investing in the right asset
so
in
you
the right
can
area.
mitigate the risks considerably with structure and architecture and
Yeah.
advice,
That's right.
Resmi.
Yeah, you can. You absolutely can.
That's the idea. But you got to start somewhere. You can't ready, aim,
that's
or
it.
ready. You actually got to pull
And
the trigger.
don't ready, fire, aim either. So-
Yeah. Which I'm sure happens a lot,
It
right?
happens a lot.
Yeah,
It happens a
yeah.
lot, right? So, and in fact, when people do get started, then when they come to us with a portfolio already, they have ready, fire, aimed.
Aim.
And so we help them get the aim proper, and then get them to fire again. So when someone comes in to us, Phil, in regardless of what aspect of their journey they are in terms of career and in terms of age and in terms of their portfolio.
Yeah.
I've trained my team to talk them through the various stages of property investing. So we're getting the foundations right before we even start talking areas, before we even start talking which property to buy. We need to get the foundations right. So that way we have a continuity in terms of being able to build up from the building blocks that are already there. If you've already got a portfolio, and if you haven't got a portfolio, it's a clean slate. We can then set the foundations right. We get the cornerstone property in first. So always taking the assumption that that's the only property you'll be able to buy.
That's why it's called a cornerstone.
That's it.
So what happens is most people, when they come, they want to use a service of a buyer's agent to buy a property. And that's what they come in and inquire as. And then we take them all the way back to say, okay, why? And so that's where, as Victor was talking about the team, because we cannot help them just to buy a property, because it doesn't feel right if we just got them a property. We're not doing them any good for what they would want. It's more like what is really going to help them. So we have to take all of those steps, go backwards and figure out all these goals, all the rest of it, and then look at the age and the risk, how well they can take on the risks and the decision making and all the rest of it, to say let's work on this as your goal first. So we take a step back. So
and that would be the difference between a buyer's agent and a property strategist. Absolutely. And let's sometimes you just want a property. It could be, hey, I want a new home to live in. It needs to be by the beach, and I want to have 5 bedrooms. Can go and find myself. That's very, very different, right? That's for the purpose of owner-occupied stuff. So, we're talking about building long-term wealth creation through property. So, therefore, you absolutely need a plan and trusted partners with it. Designing your decade is key. You've got to get going. Years 0 to 1 is critical. We've sort of spoken about that today. I probably frame that with those 4 key points. You need a finance solution over an interest rate solution or a rate shopping sort of solution. You want to contain and corral and motivate positive cash flow. Try and keep it centralised, itemised to the localised to the actual property itself. You've got to get your stakeholders right early, key during this period of time, and it's never too late to either change who you're using or which property professionals you're choosing, and also have a conscious and awareness that the people you start out with in years 0 to 1 might not necessarily be the people who you're turning to for advice moving forward. But the sort of common theme of this is all when you get started and what are the sort of age and the circumstance restrictions available to you. So that's how you design your decade.
Yep. Years 0 to 1.
0 to 1. So you mentioned that your team will chat people through structurally how you would approach these things. How does that work?
So there is a fact find that they do. They there's information we need to get of them, and then obviously once they get their finance organized and all that, then they have a quick chat with me or one of the team members that I've trained up to actually set up the finer details of the strategy.
Okay.
So the conversation is always morphing until we are buyer ready.
And
so it's not like you've called today and you've got a property today. It's actually a 2-3 month process before you even start the buy side of things.
And if people are in too much of a rush, I'm sure you just go, no, it's not right for us. It's not good. Okay. How do people track you down?
You can go to our website, rightpropertygroup.com.au, or give us a phone call, 1300 302 166. Or if you're a social media nerd, just jump onto any of the social medias. You'll find
you. It's good. Nice. Lots happening. I follow you guys on the Facebook.
Haven't been that active on Facebook.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, got to get in there, get involved. But I hope you enjoy that, everyone. So this is the second installment, second episode of our special series on Design Your Decade. Go and tune into our January episode. I really enjoyed that, and also our sort of prelim idea of goal setting and planning, which we recorded earlier or late last year, actually. And I haven't spoken very quickly about it. What does the interest rate cut mean? That happened a week or so ago.
Not much.
Not much.
Yeah.
What bearing has that got to do on designing your decade?
Well, it means you're going to come up, if provided they've passed on the rate cut, you've got a better cash flow. but it's not moving the needle enough. And if anything, it's putting in more competition in the market.
Better cash flow, maybe improving your serviceability. However, more competition.
More competition.
So every
which means you're
action
paying
has
more
an
for
equal
the
and
property.
opposite reaction.
Yes.
Yep,
Yeah.
there you go. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy catching up with the guys and girls over at Right Property Group for property investing insights. We've been doing this for so long now, so there's nothing I don't think we haven't covered, so go tune into it. But we'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.